Hi there, and welcome back to the Fuse Show. Today I'm joined by Adrian King. He's the co-founder and CTO of Elements.Cloud. Thanks for joining us on the show, Adrian.
Pleasure. Been looking forward to it.
Can you give me a little bit of background on what Elements.Cloud does and how you've discovered that to be an important thing worth committing your time to?
Yeah, of course. Myself and my two co-founders, we started the business 5-6 years ago, and really the background to it was that the three of us, with actually a couple of other colleagues, ran another business from 1997, which we sold in 2011, called Nimbus, and we were providing a business process mapping product, but at scale. So we were providing ability to build hierarchies of process maps to really support building the quality management system for big organizations. And, when we started that business, it was a desktop app selling for $500 a seat. We were selling, one or two seats to organizations. I think our largest single deal by the time we sold the business in 2011 was just over $1 million of software for a single deal. So we'd scaled it to the enterprise. We were selling, basically it was a sort of knowledge management platform for organizations to catch their business processes. And because of the type of organizations we were selling to, the dominant system was SAP that we were engaged with, the Nestle's and the AstraZenecas and the Chevrons of this world who are clients. And what they wanted us to do was to link the business processes, and we weren't talking about BPMN executable. We were talking about very much documenting what the end users understood about how the business operates from a quality management point of view. They want to be able to link which SAP transactions were being used and which bits of the business processes, and starting to build this sort of system to business process architecture, but not in a way which is very technical, but in a way which genuinely end users understood, and actually, in the Nestle factories, people would literally walk through the process diagrams and click and launch the SAP transaction. It became the operations manual for them. We internally were using Salesforce, and actually, I've got reasonably good bragging rights in that actually I was a Salesforce admin in 2001. So no, I've been using Salesforce for 20 years now. And, we started when there were, 15 of us or something in 2001 with Salesforce to replace ACT actually as our contact management system. And over the 10 years from 2001 to 2011, we became poster childs for using Salesforce. I drank the Kool-Aid, and before the app exchange, before the ability to, it was a platform. It started basically as Oracle Forms in the cloud, if you really think about where it started. And but as the configuration and the extension capability came on, we just built out all our execution capabilities, all our data management capabilities. And I had as well as I started as CTO, and then actually as we grew, I became COO and ran the business. Basically, every function of the business other than finance reported to me. And I had this mantra, which was all data lived in Salesforce. And, we had 300 something custom objects that we built by that time. We built out, and we used our own process management application, the Nimbus platform, to map out our business processes. And what we were doing for our clients with SAP, I desperately wanted to be able to do for Salesforce. What I actually wanted to be able to do was map which bits of Salesforce and the configuration I'd done were being used by which bits of my business process, because we were rapidly evolving the business processes were changing all the time as we scaled. And there were basically two questions I wanted the COO to be able to understand and answer, which is, if I re-engineer this bit of the business, which bits of Salesforce do I have to change? If we decide to, as Salesforce is rapidly evolving, if we use some new technology to enhance a bit of Salesforce, which bits of my business depended on this? And those two questions are actually really fundamental if you're trying to run an operation and use the systems. Because we were pretty disciplined about this, and I'm sure anybody who's been involved in the operations side of the business can relate to the fact that it's incredibly easy to break your business. As you change business processes, you realize that there are bits of the systems you just didn't realize supported that bit of the business. And now you have that mismatch, and the business, you come in the next day and your business isn't working properly because the systems don't reflect what you do. Or you go and make a change to the system to to sort out, this bit of a business. You didn't realize there were two other bits of a business completely dependent on what's going on here. You've now broken. So we were helping our big clients using SAP to actually answer those questions. And I realized that we desperately needed that for internally for our own Salesforce system. And we actually by hand mapped, and we had capabilities in the Nimbus product to effectively manually define the configuration of Salesforce. And the configuration capabilities then were a fraction of what they are now. And we actually did start, we built these mappings against our processes. And it did help, but it was hard work. And we sold the business, the three founders, we moved off, did other things. And we decided in 2015 that actually we wanted to come back together. We enjoyed working with each other. And what I came to guys and said, look, there is a massive opportunity. Salesforce has moved from being this tactical platform for departmental solutions in most cases to becoming one of the strategic IT platforms globally.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, about 200,000 clients. I mean, it's north of 300,000 organizations using Salesforce now. And because of the evolution from being a departmental platform, but massively configurable, is that there wasn't a great deal of tooling to support at a governance level and really understanding how you configured Salesforce and managing it. We saw an enormous opportunity basically to start providing a tooling platform around helping people understand how they configured Salesforce, documenting what they'd done, and providing tools to assist in basically building the right thing. There are some fantastic tools emerged over the last 7-8 years, particularly in the DevOps space. The Capados, the Gear Sets, the AutoRabbits, Flowsums, around basically taking what was the change set management, which was really hard in Salesforce actually with the tooling, and providing decent DevOps tools specific to Salesforce. The challenge of good DevOps tools is you actually get really good at deploying potentially stuff which you really should never have built in the first place. That's about building things right. A lot of what we're focused on is building the right thing, understanding that actually the business needs this capability to support its business processes, and make sure you're building the right thing. And building the right thing, that's about understanding what you've already built, being able to make sensible decisions about both the to-be process you want to support, the impact of the change against what you've already got. And it's all about basically capturing that configuration knowledge, as we described it, the knowledge of how you've configured the existing platform, what processes it supports, the hundreds of different metadata types that the Salesforce platform now supports. It is, I adore Salesforce. I think it's a fantastic platform, but its greatest asset is its also massive Achilles heel, which is because it's so configurable and it's actually very easy for, I call it, lay people to do it. The good IT disciplines are often not applied, and very quickly you get basically anarchy can set in, and the agility that you bought Salesforce for, you lose because people are terrified of changing it because they don't understand what they have done to it. And very early on, I remember one of the best descriptions, we were talking to a senior admin of a reasonable sized Salesforce org. And they basically went, every day it feels like I'm playing Jenga with my org. I hope it hasn't collapsed. And I think that's actually many people who are running Salesforce have that same feeling, which is they really don't know what they have and how they have configured their org, and every time they now go into changing it, there is a significant risk. And with Elements, we're basically trying to provide a platform and tooling on top of the platform to help people basically capture the knowledge of how they have configured Salesforce, and providing tools to assist in providing structured way of thinking about applying change to the Salesforce platform. And we talk specifically about Salesforce, but actually the underlying platform and concept is not specific to Salesforce. It's off platform. We actually have people using this around other systems. It's just our focus and tooling has been on Salesforce because there's such an enormous market, and we believe underserved market. So long answer to the question, but hopefully gives some context to why we're doing what we're doing and the marketplace we're basically supporting out there.
Who is your ideal customer for Elements.Cloud in terms of like size of organization or revenue run rate or number of users, however you want to define it?
The reality is, I think virtually anybody who is using Salesforce could get benefit from our product. Our target market as we're growing out is the smallish enterprise, large mid-market at the moment, and putting our product in has change management implications for organizations. And the very large enterprises, putting in new tooling and platforms for knowledge, they've already got well-established environments, and putting in new, it takes a long time, and there's still a relatively small Salesforce ISV. The cost of engaging with the large enterprise is very significant. It isn't that we aren't engaging with them. It's just that it's not where our focus is. What we're finding is that the organizations who have between 200 and 3,000 or 4,000 Salesforce seats appears to be the sweet spot for us at the moment.
I see.
The economic buyer is close enough to the problem that they recognize the issues, but they've also got sufficient spend. They're spending between $500,000 and a couple of million on Salesforce licenses every year. They're probably spending total cost of ownership as another 2, 3, 4x on top of that. There are very significant opportunities to get a good return on investment of putting what is really a knowledge management platform in place to really help them get the return on investment, which is in the $1 million to $5 to $8 million a year they're spending on the Salesforce platform in totality. Their ability to get a very significant improvement. I mean, as you can tell by my hair, I've been in the industry now, I realised, for 35 years. So I've got. I've seen quite a lot of the challenges we have, as in the IT space. I started my career on massive waterfall projects. One of the I worked in the defence sector, and one of the projects I was working on from inception to go live was 14 years. So it's massive, big analysis phases. It's really interesting the challenges that we've got in the industry of how we go and build stuff correctly. And I'm a massive advocate of shift left, which is too many problems emerge in acceptance testing, actually in production. Too often we build stuff which never gets used. And these are enormous costs to organizations, actually, and often not recognized. And there's 50 years of research which looks at a problem found in getting the right requirement versus discovering that problem in acceptance testing is 100x, or 10x, and it depends on the space and on the problem, right. And but this isn't a 10%. It's actually 1,000% or 10,000% cost difference. And I think that I've always been really interested in how do we assist people in issue identification earlier in the life cycle. That takes discipline. You've actually got to think early about problems. You've actually got to do a level of analysis. You've got to do a level of, but you can only do analysis and you can only get the insights if you actually understand what you've got. I come back to, if you don't have the knowledge, you can't make informed decisions. And blimey, we're as guilty ourselves. The times when we make changes and we go, we didn't really intend that. That consequence of that's a bit painful, isn't it? And you go, how could we have avoided that? And that's, that's my passion, really. Over the years, is how do we assist organisations to build things better, build the right thing. It's really sad when we go in and we're helping clients and we go and look at their org and they've built some capability, and you discover there isn't a single record in the object. Nobody has ever used that capability. And that happens. And you go, I wonder how much effort and cost was spent building that, and it never gets used. So that's what really drives me. And it's great. I'm 35 years and I still get a massive kick out of the stuff I'm doing at the moment.
So you described the problem that your target demographic faces, as well as the limitations of platforms like Salesforce that is inherent into its design for. I'm pretty sure they have good intentions of trying to make it easy to use, but the complexity can just explode. What is? Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Salesforce is a massively powerful and fantastic platform, but with any of these very platforms which you can configure and basically build systems on, they can and it is interesting. I mean, Salesforce. It's very hard to actually work out exactly how many metadata types there are, but it is in the hundreds. Every time you configure something like this, it's almost not like just writing code where you've got one manifestation of the of what's going to execute. On the Salesforce platform, you've got to go and look in 100 places or plus to go and understand what you've done. Massively powerful. The whole low code, no code is quite it's a brilliant revolution in many ways, but it also makes it far too easy to make changes, and it makes it far too easy to make changes without thinking enough about the change. And then the long-term consequences come back to bite you in days, weeks, months, years.
What does Elements.Cloud bring to the table to address these concerns or prevent them at an earlier stage?
So I come back to the fact that we're basically providing a platform in which we can allow. Let's say that one of the key things we do is we pull the metadata of Salesforce out into basically an Explorer view. It's basically the data dictionary of the configuration, and that skeleton allows us then to go and do. I'm going to call auto documentation generation. We can then go and mine information on that to expose it. And some of it's really simple. It's just showing you how many records of an object by record type and the growth of that over time, which fields have actually got any data in them. So just really simple analysis type stuff that allows you to start to get a picture of what's going on in your org. But we also look and surface the dependencies between, if I was to go and change this field, it's used on 6-page layouts, 3 validation fields. So the impact analysis of, I'm just going to add a new pick list value to this field. Oh, whoa, this field is actually used in 4 flows, 2 process builders. If I go and change this, what is the impact of change? And we can go and surface all that information. But what we also allow you to do is to add your own documentation. But in the context, why did I build the flow this way? And actually, the really interesting thing is not what did I build, but why. I'm a software engineer by background. And the reality is, if I really want to know what's happening, I go and look at the code. Because it doesn't matter how good the documentation is. In the end, I trust what the code does more than the documentation. But looking at the code doesn't tell me why it was built that way. And understanding why is really, really, really important. I mean, there have been times when I've done some work on a Friday and they come back on a Monday and look at it and go, I can see what it does, but I can't even after 72 hours understand why I built it that way. So really important so that people can actually start to capture, just that screenshot of a whiteboard attached to the flow explains the notes, very quick to go and capture and pull information into context. But the product also has the whole process mapping capabilities of being able to build hierarchies of process maps using the same notation we had at Nimbus. So again, you can start going, this particular field is used to support this activity in my business process. That knowledge is that, and I come back to that knowledge of why that field is being used there becomes really important if I want to go and change my business process. So the fact I can start building connections to that. We've got the ability, I mean, we're ISO 27001 certified, as you expect. So I actually had my recertification audit Monday and Tuesday this week. And within the product, you can also build basically tree structures just of information. And one of those tree structures is the 27001 control hierarchy. The ability for us to, when we do this, a particular ISO control, we can link to both the processes. This particular process supports this particular control point from information security, but also this particular artifacts in Salesforce supports this business control. So what we're starting to do is build the connections between bits of information, which starts to build up knowledge about, if I go and change this, what am I going to break? If I want to go and do this, this network of knowledge of different artifact types, that starts to give you the power to be informed, to make sensible and rational decisions. We also have the ability, we've got the ability to capture feedback from users directly from Salesforce, directly into our product. But you can then turn that knowledge into a business requirement. So we basically have a requirement management capability. And requirements, if I've got a requirement, I then want to do the analysis of what does this requirement really mean? That's basically we use, the business process mapping allows you to go and explore. If I want to do this for business, what does that mean in terms of the process I'm going to support? The ability to map out the entity relationship diagrams. What's the data? All of that stuff we can now link to the process, to the requirement. We also then have the ability to actually have a list of JC changes, stories of what now change do we actually have to do to the systems to implement that requirement. So you can see that we're starting to support a piece of feedback results in a requirement. That requirement goes through the analysis to really surface exactly what you're trying to do. By then going through and looking at the process, you can actually start to go through. And I mean, the interesting way our processes work is basically, a very simple boxes and lines. And the box is basically what you want to do. You've got the resource, who's going to do it, the output. That is actually a user story in many cases. As I want to, so that I can. Just walking through the process, you go, right, that we already do that. Actually, we need to change this. This means we got a new user story. It's a way of doing the fit gap. So we have a methodology. We can help clients get good set of user stories to actually support the business requirements. Those stories can be linked to the Salesforce metadata items, so you can start to build the manifest of change. All of this is about building the relationships between all of these different artifacts. What it means is that when I come in 2 months later and go, actually, we need to go and do X, we've got a new business requirement. I can go through, look at the existing process maps I've got, go, actually, this I need to change. This means these stories. This story means I need to go and change this flow in Salesforce, or add a new object, or go and add a pick list item. I can then go and look at the history of what I've done to this metadata item before and why I've configured it in the way, because I've just got all that knowledge. Before I even touch the system, I can make rational decisions about the cost and impact of change. And I come back to, so many times you just dump in and go and do that change, and then later on you go, that field was also being used to support these 2 other business processes I've now broken. The cost of discovering that once you've done that change, or even potentially put it into production, as has happened to us in the past, is very significant. If I can catch that during the analysis phase or the design phase, I can save 10x in cost.
Great.
100x, 2x, whatever it might be. Depends. That's basically our mission, is to effectively use knowledge to empower people to make good decisions earlier in the process.
So you've been at this company for almost 7 years, is that right?
About 6 years. We started 6 years ago. Yeah.
6 years? You're probably one of the few guests we've had on the show that is north of the 5 year mark in terms of like
Right.
5 years with the same company.
Yeah.
How has your company transformed over those years?
We're still very small, actually. I mean, we're getting good revenue growth. We're doing stuff. I mean, it's very interesting. You know, we're three founders. We're geographically very spread. Ian, who's our CEO, is based in San Francisco. We're all Brits, but he's in San Francisco. I'm in the UK. Richard lives in France. Our engineering group is actually in the Ukraine. I use a third-party product development organisation. Very, very good long-term relationship. Been working with them for 6 years. To be honest, we've been on a mission. We knew it was going to take time. We knew it was going to take time to build out a very complex product. So we haven't been in a rush. For us, this is a marathon rather than a sprint. We've certainly, I wouldn't say we've been on a straight line to where we've got to today. You know, we haven't had to do a massive pivot. The vision has been the same, but we've definitely we've understood and trying to understand what the market needs has been. We knew what we thought we were trying to build, but I think we were ahead of the market in many cases. People, I don't think a lot of people really understood the power of really having configuration knowledge at their fingertips. I think in the last 18 months, we've seen a big shift in people starting to realize the power of what we bring. But part of that is because the product has matured and we're providing a lot more capability. So I don't think the business, I think, you know, we're, in total, we're now about 40 people. So, you know, we're including the engineer, and I include the engineering group in that. I think the thing that we probably are now really focusing, and we've recently taken a significant amount of money to start to accelerate the growth because we think we've actually got the product now to pull the foot down. So, you know, we're now starting to hire a lot more customer success people to be able to help people get the value from the product. So I think the big transition we're going through at the moment is going from really getting product market fit, and whilst we've been growing revenue, we've got, you know, several hundred, you know, paying customers of the product, and actually we have a freemium component, and there is a small part that the core process mapping side is a free part of our product. So we actually have, I think we're approaching 50,000 users on the platform. The number, you know, we've got several hundred paying customers now. It isn't that we not wanted to grow revenue, but actually our objective was to build the product to the point when it really was solving the problem for customers. And that's taken us 5 years fundamentally to really build out what is a very big platform. And now we're ready to really put our foot down, and it's an enormous market. And we're getting enormous traction now of people starting to understand that. I come back to, if you're spending $5 million a year on your Salesforce platform, you can, a significant part of that is probably not being spent as well as it could be, in that if you were to identify issues earlier in the life cycle, if you were to really understand what you've got, how much of the $3 million a year you're spending on running your platform could you either save or use that money much better to support the business? And that's actually resonating with the platform owners and the CIOs that we're now talking to.
I recognize you're the CTO, but would you happen to know how you got the first paying customers?
How do we get our first paying customers? We engaged very heavily with the community. The thing I love about Salesforce as well is it has an enormous community around there. So we just started going to the dreaming events. We started sponsoring those, and that was where we started to get our first customers, by basically showing what we got and being very engaged with the community. And it's interesting because the last 12 months I think, you know, COVID has been a very, very interesting thing in that it's changed the engagement dynamics in the Salesforce ecosystem. And we used to go to 20 dreaming events plus a year, probably one every 2 weeks, both in Europe and in North America. Clearly, those have been happening a little bit online, but it's never quite the same. We're very excited. I mean, Tahoe Dreaming in October is back. We're sponsoring it. Being able to get back out, engage with the community, get a lot of feedback from them. But that was how our first paying customers came, was basically by being out there in the Salesforce community.
I imagine as a result of COVID, a lot more business processes get significantly more complex. So they have to mix some people who come to the office, some people who work from remote, some people who work remote permanently. Do you notice it affecting your business in any significant or measurable way?
Absolutely, at two different levels. One is internally. So as well as CTO, I'm COO. So I'm responsible for, I describe myself as basically, I marshal everything, make sure all the moving parts work, basically make sure the white space between the business silos, and even in a small company, there's white space between the business silos, is that even though we started, I mean, the three founders, we're in different continents, different countries. We knew that we had to operate well in a remote and dispersed culture. We do have an office here in the UK. We had an office in the US. We're now completely remote in the US. But particularly for more junior staff, where I have some fairly strong opinions about the fact that the remote working works really well for middle and senior staff, where you've already gained your skills, you've learned how to work with people, you've got your relationship and network. I think it's a real challenge for junior staff to evolve and develop into being really productive members of the work community, the global work community, without being able to interact in person with people and learn and be mentored. It is much harder to do it over a Zoom call than on a whiteboard and just listening to the conversation. And we've done, I think, really well of taking graduates straight out of college and mentoring them, growing them. And I think that COVID has made that harder. So internally, I think we've had to work really hard on communication. I don't think it's as good as it was. Just the reality. The interesting thing is in the UK, I've always been very keen that you don't have a 9 to 5 culture. I mean, clock watching type culture is horrendous. You should be. I've always joked I'm far too lazy to micromanage people. It just isn't my. I like to make sure that people understand the objectives that they're trying to achieve and then empower them to do that. And I've been talking to all of my staff in the UK, going, the work-life balance, the remote working is not actually Monday I'll work in the office and Tuesday I'll be at home. It's most of them live within 20, 30 minutes of the office, which is, if you want to come into the office for 2 hours and avoid the commute traffic, work from home till 11 o'clock. If you want, come in from 11 till 1, have some meetings and then go home, pick up the kids if you want to, work into the, so I think we've been educating people to that use the tools. If you want to meet people, come and meet people in person. Arrange to come and share the office space. So I think the whole COVID thing has made us think really carefully about what work-life balance is. How do we attract people? But how do we train people? And I don't mean train formally. How do we coach and mentor and just get people who've only come straight out of college or have only got 1 or 2 years experience? How do you get to the point where when they've got 5, 6, 7 years experience, they could work remotely? But I find it really, really hard to get things. I think we found with our development group, now they're remote and they're in the Ukraine, but actually my product manager myself, we used to go, the very early days, in the first 2 years, I went to the Ukraine 40 times. To give you an idea, I was flying every other week to the Ukraine to work with them in the early days. Incredibly engaged team. We work very, very closely with them there now, but they're still remote. Interestingly, they moved to remote working with COVID. They had to close the office down, etc. Lots of quite young developers on the team. It was very interesting that actually I think productivity did suffer. I think not that they couldn't write the same amount of code, but they weren't talking to each other. They weren't learning off each other in the same way. And I look back to my when I was in my early 20s and learning to to become. I was never a very good programmer, interestingly. I've always been much more interested in system architecture, and that was why, I went down that route much more very early. But I learned by just listening to people and sitting people and doing code reviews and working on whiteboards, and that I think has suffered quite a lot in the year. And I spent quite a lot of time recently going, we've got to make sure that the junior staff, just that osmosis process of gaining knowledge and skills, and we've got to work out how we do that better in the COVID world. So that's the internal. I think the dealing with the customer base, both prospect and selling, and then supporting. COVID has changed lots of things, which some will change, some definitely won't. I mean, I think in the US, just by the sheer scale of the country, I think people are already much more receptive to remote sales calls. I think using video conferencing, it was already more embedded into the US culture than it was, say, in the UK. And fundamentally, I can drive to anywhere in the UK, or I can fly to relatively quickly. So I think there was a much stronger culture of in-person sales meetings in the UK and in Europe. That has changed. But it was much easier to get hold of people. I think people are now very fatigued by being able to run Zoom meetings all the time, etc. So I think we're seeing a change. It's getting harder again to engage with people remotely. People are getting much better going, no, I just don't want to talk to you. I'm fed up of doing it 6 hours on Zoom every day. So I think there's definitely been a change in the way we're engaging with our customers. I do think the flip side is in the support side, I think the tools and expectation has got a lot better. The ability to just jump on and do a 5-minute web call with somebody to go and fix a problem, that's become much more dynamic. Whereas 15 years ago, if you were doing support, it was looking back, a relatively slow process. Now with chat apps, chat built into your application. Somebody can just raise a chat that can be picked up in a couple of minutes. You have a quick chat with them. We use intercom, lots of chat, but intercom's integrated in with Zoom. We can just literally from intercom go, right, actually, can we just have a 2-minute Zoom call to look at the problem? Our ability to solve issues for customers now, often it can be resolved in 7 or 8 minutes, and you've actually. And the good thing is, whereas before you might have done it by email, now you actually do at least have a video face-to-face.
Right.
You build stronger relationship with your customer, solving a problem that we might have done just by email in the past. So I think there's some really interesting change in dynamics going on out there at the moment.
On the first thing you're talking about in the COVID culture as it relates to your internal processes, I recognize you've spent a bulk of your career across various leadership roles. What are some of the things that you've learned across those experiences that you carry into your current role?
Oh, blimey, that's it's interesting because but the leadership roles have also not just been technical. I've actually been between 2011 2015. I was actually CEO of a technology company for a time, which was mid-size, bigger, just under 100 people, type stuff. So, I've dealt with lots of leadership challenges and commercial challenges and dealing with the external funders and all that type of stuff. I think probably the single biggest one is never underestimate how much time and effort to invest in the relationships with your people. We live in the entire software game is an intellectual property and knowledge business. It's about the people. The real assets we have in this business, fine, we actually have our code base in the end, which is our intellectual property. But the real intellectual property is in the heads of the people who created that. And the long-term value is in the staff and the motivation of the staff and making sure we're all aligned and we know where we go. Managing relationships and dealing with the communication and being really clear with the vision with people of what you're trying to achieve is probably the most important lesson I've learned from 35 years. If you can get, if you can provide that leadership to people, they know why they're doing something, and you can communicate that and motivate them, you can have an incredibly strong business. It's when people don't understand why they're coming in, it becomes just a job to pay the mortgage.
Okay.
Productivity, motivation, desire, delivery just starts to collapse.
And what was there like an aha moment where this lesson really hit you, or did you like learn it early on and became more reinforced over time? Like, how did that play out in your personal experience?
So I actually started my career actually in the military. So after university, I actually went into the British Army for a short time, and if there's something the military is very good at, it's actually leadership skills in its office corps. So I think the understanding of motivation and leadership was a large part of my very early career. Even though I did engineering at university, my early career was very early career was in the military. I think very early the leadership issues and communication and ensuring that, to be honest, motivating somebody to write code is a hell of a lot easier than motivating somebody to run up a hill into machine gun fire, to be blunt. There is a reason why the military, okay, you've got command structures which exist, but actually it's about leadership and motivation to get people to go and do things. So I'd say it was very early on that some of the foundations were put in there. And I don't think I'm a necessarily particularly good manager, but I think I'm a relatively good leader. And I think there are massively different skills. And I think that leadership is fundamentally important to create a successful business. You've got to have good management. You've got to have good management practices in place. But you can have great management practices and appalling leadership, and the business will fail. You can have great leadership and mediocre management, and the business may well actually succeed. So I think that leadership, that motivation, how do you motivate and get a team wanting to succeed is I think I learned it pretty early on, and it's been reinforced, and I think in every role I've had and in roles, I think you often really learn, through my career. I worked in one organisation I was going back well over 20 years, where as a development manager, a mid-sized development team, I had about 60 people in the development team at that point in time. And I worked in an organisation where the CEO, it was my worst experience. The CEO is fundamentally a bully. It's a very, very poor, I believe, very poor culture. It was a horrible place to work. And, when I inherited my team, we had well over 30% staff attrition from my engineering group every year. You cannot run an engineering group with 30% attrition. The knowledge just is disappearing out of the door so fast. You're spending all your time recruiting. It was really hard to set a vision and the leadership when the whole culture of the company was dysfunctional, basically. And I learned probably more about how to do stuff by what I saw, what not to do, as much as what I should do. So no, it's been a continual process, and I don't think I'm very. There's an enormous amount still to learn, but I do think that leadership, that motivating people, setting a culture which people believe in and want to work in is fundamentally important.
As you try to raise the next level of leaders within your company, what are some of the traits that you look for, or what are some of the things you try to foster?
Honesty, integrity are absolutely fundamental. Giving anybody who works for you the credit and you taking the blame. In the end, any issue fundamentally lands on my shoulders.
Right.
In the end, so have broad shoulders. Be willing to take. If there is a problem, stand up and own it. If great stuff happens, ensure the credit goes to where it's due. And I want to see the leaders coming up. The people I'm coaching and mentoring, I want to see these type of characteristics coming through in them, because that engenders respect from the people that they are then leading. If we try to have a no blame culture, and I think this, which is, I want to see people creating a learning organization where we all make mistakes, stuff happens, accept that stuff happens, learn from it, don't blame, no blame, just go, stuff happens, how quickly can we sweep it up, sort it out, and learn from it? And I want the leaders to go, fine, that's it, we're going to sort this out, let's learn from it, and not blame people. If anybody's going to take the blame, it's they take the blame, which is, okay, something happened here. We and me, we need to learn not for that not to happen again. And I think that's the type of thing I want the people I'm coaching to have that ethos of taking responsibility and ensuring that credit gets given where it's due. Getting people to genuinely believe that they can, that the people who work for them can thrive under them. And to thrive, you've got to be willing to accept mistakes get made. I've often said we should celebrate failure more than success, because in failure, as long as somebody has done something with the right intention, if they fail, it's an opportunity to learn. Now, there are lots of times when I grit my teeth when I see something hasn't gone right, but the reality is that as long as we learn from that, and it's only from when things go well, you very rarely learn from them, actually.
Right.
When things don't go well is when you get the opportunity to improve. So you've got to make sure that actually, if something hasn't worked, people don't try and sweep it under the rug or the carpet, because if you do, you never learn from it. Hence my comment about an honest culture and one with integrity is one where you can learn and improve and become better. That's what I'm looking for in coaching and the leaders of the future.
So the last question I have for you is, what advice would you give to someone who wants to fall, maybe not exactly your footsteps, but similarly down the path that you've gone down yourself?
I'm going to actually say it, which is, don't try and plan your career too much. Enjoy what you do now. Learn, thrive, never stop learning. Give more than you take. As in, put in, support other people. Karma, it will come back to you at some point. Your career will thrive if you give to your colleagues, your community. And it's amazing what the opportunities will then come. And then take the opportunities that come. But I didn't plan my career in any sense. I really enjoy technology, and opportunities have come and I've taken them. And I think the most important thing is be positive. Enjoy what you do. See opportunities, take them. See opportunities for other people and help them achieve their goals. Amazing how they will open up opportunities 2 years down the line. Something will occur because you did something. So my comment is give more than take. Enjoy now. Thrive now. Enjoy what you do now. Because you learn and because you give and because you're positive, opportunities will come to you. People will recognize that positivity and want to work with you, and consequently opportunities will come your way. But trying to over plan your career, I personally think that's just a recipe for disappointment, actually, because
I like it.
I mean, I was talking to one of my junior product managers. I mean, he's probably 24, so by my fee, I mean, just, a youth, about this. I started when I wanted the spec written up, I sent it to the typing pool. When I think about the way we worked, and I remember email emerging in the office, quite some time into my career, if I think about the technologies and the opportunities and what we do now, I couldn't even conceive of those when I was a 25-year-old. So trying to plan your career, I just wanted to do interesting things with technology. I've thrived. I've had great jobs. I discovered that I wasn't built to be in a big corporate. I mean, I've worked in some big companies, but it's not. I love startups. I love entrepreneurship. I discovered that I was comfortable taking commercial risk, and lots of people aren't. But I discovered I was, and I enjoyed it. But I didn't realise that was. I mean, if at 24. I thought that I probably wanted to become an exec in a big company,
Okay.
But actually, I realised that I got a job working for a quite big software house, and quite soon realised that wasn't really for me. I got the opportunity, came up to go and take a 2-year research fellowship at CERN, the particle physics lab. Completely left field. Took that. Brilliant fun. 2 years postgraduate degree in technology, fundamentally in the 1991. I did that. That then opened up an avenue which took me somewhere else. I then got an opportunity to go and work for one of the big consulting firms. Learned a lot, discovered that actually I was an operational person, not a consultant. I liked owning the operation and taking responsibility for stuff. But that relatively short time doing strategy consulting opened my eyes to an enormous amount of things. And actually since then, my career has been in product development in different increasing leadership roles. Never thought I'd be a CEO. Enjoyed it, but actually realised I preferred the technology side, and I really enjoy being CTO and COO of businesses. I like making the trains run on time, fundamentally. I like making the operation work well, and I like coaching people and getting my line managers to function better. And who knows what I'll be doing in 10 years' time. Enjoy the moment.
Well, I appreciate this past.
The biggest piece of advice I can give people is enjoy what you do now.
I've really enjoyed this past hour. I'm very thankful for your advice, and I look forward to meditating on this during my next meditation session.
Perfect.
I just want to leave you with one last thing, and that is if our viewers want to get in touch with you or follow you along or your company's journey in your development, where should they go? Where should they find you?
So interestingly, I'm sufficiently old that I'm not particularly active on social media personally. But the best way is, if anybody wants to reach out to me directly, Adrian at Elements.Cloud. I'm very happy to take emails. I mean, it is a bit sad, but I'm still quite an email guy. Email. But actually, we've got Elements.Cloud, our website, great blogs on there. If you want to follow what we're doing, that's the place to go. But I enjoy mentoring people outside the company as well. So if there are people on here who would like to reach out to me, please feel free to reach out to me directly. And I can't guarantee to be engaged massively. My workload goes up and down, but I will try and respond. And if people have got questions, I'd be delighted to engage out there.
Sounds good. Well, thanks again for your time, Adrian.
Pleasure.